Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy Dees. Welcome to the podcast. I am absolutely thrilled that you are here. If you have never checked out the Billy Dees podcast before, let me tell you just a few things about our program. We are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. Topics can range from just about anything, current events, news-oriented, opinion, and so on. Last week, we had Dorothy Rosby on the program. Dorothy is a fantastic humorist, and she has a new book out, Alexa's a Spy, and Other Things to be Ticked Off About, humorous essays on the hassles of our time. We talked about humor during stressful times and everything that the world is going through right now. Very interesting interview. Now, typically, I try not to book authors one after the other. For one thing, Dorothy's episode is still getting a lot of listens, and I don't want the episodes to take listens away for one from the other. And the other thing is that obviously the audience, to have one after the other, an author, I try to mix things up a little bit. So we got some great interviews coming up. As a matter of fact, a very interesting one coming up that's right now scheduled for the 1st of July. I'm not going to say his name yet, but he is an associate of mine. He and I have worked on some podcasts and stuff in the past. And he went through some sort of, I'm not sure what the right word is, some sort of a transformation. He was always religious to a point, but he's in a different place now, and he's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about that journey. And he is going to talk about his beliefs and why he feels they're so important. And that's going to be an interesting interview for me, because I'm very interested to find out exactly how this came about. So that's coming up the first week or so of July. We have some other things I can't talk about yet. I can't tip my hat yet about, but some very interesting stuff coming up in terms of interviews. You can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are found, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Those two are really big here for us on the podcast, where a lot of our listens come from those two places. We are also on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Stitcher, whatever your favorite podcast machine happens to be. Do check us out. We're probably on there. You can also find me on Twitter. Real easy to find on Twitter, at Billy Dees on Twitter. Recently, I have done, over the past, several years, for one reason or another, I have totally ignored YouTube. And I don't know why. I'm kind of from the camp, you can only do so many things well. And the podcast has been growing. We're on different platforms all the time. Of course, I have to manage the content and everything else. And that's on top of all of the other things that I have to do in regard to work and everything else. But recently, I've decided to aim my sights a little bit more at YouTube. So the Billy Dees podcast is now on YouTube as well. And we also are cultivating our presence on Facebook. You can find the Billy Dees podcast page on Facebook. All right, as far as today's podcast, we're going to talk about a number of different things, one of which is free speech. And of course, this is my opinion about things, but you get that, right? Nonetheless, we're going to talk about free speech. We're going to talk about NASCAR, and it's not going to be sports and racing and all these things. What we're going to talk about, NASCAR is going through some changes. And a big one kind of happened within the last few days. We're going to talk about that and how it applies to branding and marketing, which is going to kind of fold into our last topic, which is going to be, in the atmosphere of COVID-19 and a lot of other things, can branding, can marketing work? Is it worth your quote-unquote investment? We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Every once in a while here, we do some shout-outs, and we're going to do that today. One of my favorite people to shout out is always Donna Kavanaugh over at humoroutcast.com. Some fantastic writers over there. If you haven't had a chance, do check them out. Humoroutcast.com, the place to take a humor break. New content posted pretty much every day. And that website is also part of a publishing wheelhouse. There's HO Press, Shore House Books, Corner Office Books, a number of them. We produce some of their podcasts. And if you like, you can go to humoroutcast.com and click on the podcast tab, and there you go. If you enjoy information about writers and inspiration for writing and all these things, there's some great episodes up there. Of course, you can check out those same podcasts on the Billy D's podcast. Just go through our playlist for anything labeled Humor Outcast Interview, and there you go. Also, I would like to shout out to my Pattern family friends. And what that is a hashtag on Twitter, hashtag Pattern Family. And that is a group of podcasters who retweet each other. They help promote each other and so on. And even if you are a podcast fan, it is a great place to find out about different podcasts that are out there, different types of content, and so on. So if you're on Twitter and you like podcasts, podcasts and Twitter, they really go together. Twitter's like built for podcasting. So check out the hashtag Pattern Family and have yourself a good time. Now, one of my associate, members, I'm not sure it's that formal, but somebody that, another show that I often retweet and share content with is the Rob and Slim Show. Now, the Rob and Slim Show is a little bit different than this one. Very high energy, to say the least, very freewheeling. And you know what? While I'm on the subject, I'm going to say a lot of times, because of the fact that most of my podcasts lately are about current events and their discussion forums, and I do a lot of work with authors and so on, a lot of people just presume that's always my style. And the fact of the matter is, my history in audio-only content, and that goes back to the radio days. I remember driving around in my car with what were called carts, little reels of tape that I would give to the radio stations with things that I had produced on them. And so my history on this, now this was back when, if you remember, if you were a radio listener back in the late 1980s through the 1990s, those morning zoos were very popular. Catch, so-and-so in the morning zoo, every morning radio. Okay, I was all a part of that. I've worked in nightclubs for years. I worked as a stand-up comedian. So a lot of times when people are considering guests, I don't know, Billy D's might be too uptight for us. And that's not true. That is absolutely not true. I very much enjoy doing that type of content. And these guys, Rob and Slim, they sent me a promo, and I am going to play it. I'm going to play it at the end of the show, only because it's loaded with expletives, and I don't want to have to tag any of my stuff as explicit. So I'm going to give you a verbal warning now about the promo, and then I'll mention it again before we play it later in the podcast here in a little bit. I'll play it, and I'll remind you that some 4-letter words might be coming your way. All right. One of the things we're going to talk about on today's episode is, in fact, free speech. I'm not going to get into a whole lengthy discussion about it, but it bears some comment, because one of the things we're going to talk about here in a moment is the Confederate flag, which again has come up as a subject of debate on social media and in the regular media as well. And one of the things I have noticed is that when people are talking about free speech, whether you are pro or con on any given issue, most of the time when I notice it, it is being evoked in a way that really doesn't apply to the situation. Free speech provisions are actually very narrow in comparison with what most people take them for granted to be, and that is a shield. Okay, it's a shield. I have my free speech shield, and I can charge into the public domain to say whatever I wish with immunity, and it's all just going to bounce off of me because I have free speech. And when they get tangled up in problems, they say, well, hey, what happened to my free speech? Nothing happened to it, because free speech provisions apply most specifically to governmental censorship. So, yes, you can say whatever you want when you are criticizing the government, and I would imagine that displaying the Confederate flag, if that's something that you want to do, is covered under free speech as far as the government is concerned. No one from the government is going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, you got to shut up. Okay. And that's one of the great things about this country. I mean, we have had our problems, to be sure. We have made enormous mistakes. But one of the safety valves that our construct of government has is our ability to speak. If you are part of a group that is being passed over or you're being mistreated, at the very least, one of the safety valves is you can make your situation known. And the government can't come and stomp you out if they don't happen to agree with your point of view. That's one of the great things about this country. But that's what it's limited to. Okay? So, for example, if you want to display the Confederate flag, no one from the government's going to tell you can't do it. But let's say you have a business and people stop coming to you because the attitude around that flag has changed. That's not an infringement on your free speech. You have the free speech. It's just not paying off for you. As a matter of fact, it is, in terms of your branding, it is doing you harm. And you can say, well, that's not what the flag is all about. That's not what I'm trying to say, blah, blah, blah. That's all well and good. But, I'll tell you what, I've been in marketing a long time, and I've been in advertising a long time, and I've dealt with clients who very unfairly have had a bad brand image. It's very unfair. A lot of times their name resembles another company who has had problems or other things, and through no fault of their own, they have a brand image problem. But I've often said, as horrible and as cold as this sounds, is that you have no rights in the court of public opinion. None. Okay? And if you want to display something, regardless of what it is, even though the government is going to tell you, yeah, you can do that if you want, we're not going to stop you. Okay, if you still want to display whatever it is, you run the risk of some sort of a backlash. And a lot of times that can mean losing your customer base. It can mean tarnishing your brand image into something that it doesn't really mean, that you feel that it doesn't really mean. But in the end, that doesn't matter. Okay, image is something that is very hard to cultivate. A brand is something that you really have to know what you're doing to cultivate it, but it can be destroyed in one day. It can be absolutely destroyed in one day. All right. Now, this all brings us to what's going on with NASCAR right now. And this is what I'm about to talk about here has nothing to do with racing and all the individual drivers in the sport itself. I'll be very honest with you. My knowledge of NASCAR racing is very limited. That's nothing against it. I can appreciate the skill that goes involved in putting these races together and driving in them and training in them and all these other things. But NASCAR has just been one of those things that just hasn't hit my radar that often. But what this is about is public relations and the Confederate flag. Within the last week or so, NASCAR has said that the Confederate flag will no longer be displayed at its events. Now, I don't know what they can do about private individuals who come there with the flag on their vehicle or whatever, but officially, as part of the NASCAR image, the Confederate flag will no longer be displayed. Now, this has been, to one degree or another, a long part of the history of NASCAR, okay? During the 1960s, for example, and through that whole time period, the Confederate flag was very prominent. They had what I would call a little mascot type thing. There was this character named Johnny Reb who was dressed in a Confederate uniform now during the 1960s, and they would place this on the hood of the winning car at the events and have it drive around for a victory lap, okay? And it's been a part of that culture in one way or another for some time. Now, over the years, Confederate flag display has been a controversial issue. Let's say within the last decade or so, it's come up to be more of a divisive issue than anything else. And of course, recently with the horrible events around that whole incident with George Floyd, just an absolutely tragic situation. Last week or so, and here again, I'm not sure, I can't speak with authority about some of these drivers' names, so forgive me for that. But from what I understand, Darrell Wallace Jr., now he is in the top racing ranks, one of the few African Americans. He's often referred to as Bubba, I guess. He was one of the ones that spearheaded this movement, this decision, I should say, probably, to take away the Confederate flag from display at NASCAR events. Overall, this has been supported by most of the major drivers. All right. Now, there has been mixed reaction from fans because here again, this has been part of the history of NASCAR. This has been part of the brand, if you will, this rebellious Confederate flag type thing. And of course, the history of NASCAR, a lot of people would say going back years and years ago, was running moonshine. Okay, back through the Deep South. So this is something that has been a part of the image. And this is the challenge for NASCAR. I believe, my own personal opinion is, the way recent events have unfolded, the time has come to get rid of the Confederate flag. All right. But that is something that your fan base really likes. And the problem with that is, it's one thing to say, well, this is the right thing to do, the heck with it. Yes, absolutely, I would agree with that. But for right now, while we're going through this transition period, the problem is that a lot of the people who are unhappy with this decision are the people who pay for the tickets. Okay? So if they want to go national, though, which they have done, NASCAR is now a national enterprise. There was a time when, North Carolina and Talladega, and all those places were where NASCAR was, but now it's not only just in the Southeast. Okay, it's other places now. Okay, and only 2 of the top 10 drivers are from the Southeast. Okay, so if they want to go national, this is pretty much what they have to do. Another driver, Kyle Petty, has supported this, quote, a huge moment. This is probably something they have to do. But in the short term, this is something that they are going to have to wade through in terms of their fan base. And it's a problem to begin with. Okay, NASCAR's growth has not been successful. This move to go national and kind of change it into an all-American brand as opposed to something Southern with the Confederate flag, a lot of fans are abandoning the sport. The Daytona 500 most recently had approximately 7.3 million viewers, whereas in 2015, that number was 13.4 million. During this time, NASCAR has made efforts to diversify its brand values. It's doing everything right. Okay. And this, obviously this year, this has been under the cloud of COVID-19, which obviously has affected the way crowds are managed and the way to really gauge what's been going on here in terms of growth of the sport has been very difficult. And what the reactions to some of these changes has been very difficult to gauge because of COVID-19. With that being said, yes, the pandemic, any pandemic has presented a set of challenges for any organization. And a lot of my podcast listeners are fellow podcasters. They might be YouTubers. I've said this before, bloggers, all types of very creative people. And what the pandemic has done is it has created a situation where people's routines are disrupted. And especially with podcasting, for example, people listen while they are commuting or they might be on their lunch hour or what have you. And those things in their schedule, their routine has been disrupted. So it's been a challenge for all of us. But it comes with some perks. There are some openings in these times with what's been going on with the economy and what's been going on with people's routines. Okay. So my advice to NASCAR, not that they're going to take it, but my advice would be to weather this storm. These are changes that have to come. And your fan base that exists now is either going to be with you or they are not. But in terms of growth, what's going on right now with the pandemic does present some good opportunities for anyone who wants to raise brand awareness. Now, it's well known that what happens during these times is people hold their budgets back. If you are a business, or if, here again, you're a creative entity, you're going to say, I can't afford, I got to keep my doors open. Okay, I have to take care of what business pays the bills, and I can't, quote unquote, afford the expense of marketing. But you have to change that mindset. You have to change that mindset. If you want to grow like NASCAR does, my advice would be to keep your head down, plow through this, and consider your marketing plan now. Even though there's disruptions out there, the cost of advertising has dropped. All right. I don't know across the board if it's happened in television all across the country, but it most certainly has happened in radio. You can get deals right now in terms of radio that you never could have gotten pre-COVID. It just wouldn't happen. Okay. And because of the fact that so many companies are tightening their advertising belts, television and radio stations are losing business, and they want it. Okay. Prices are getting better. So now is a great time to invest. Don't consider your marketing to be an expense. Consider it an investment. Now's the time for you to cultivate a brand. And this is something that NASCAR can do now. National sporting events, the audience is all jumbled up right now. Now's the time to take advantage of these changing audiences. Bring in some people that you haven't before. Consider your quote-unquote all-American brand, your all-inclusive brand. Invest in advertising. I would do a television advertising campaign that is completely different than what they've done before. You know, stress family and fun and outdoors and hot dogs and all that stuff that baseball has always done. Okay? And now's the time when you can get a lot for your advertising dollar because the prices are low. So advertising is affordable. And the other way that you can market yourself, of course, is through social media. Well, guess what? With all the things going on right now, activity on social media is through the roof. Now, you have to do it properly. You don't want to engage in controversy. But there's so many things that you can be doing on social media right now. You can be sponsoring events that will raise awareness for social issues, for equal rights, for racial equality, and all these other things. It's such a great time to become active and present yourself with a different brand. And probably what needs to be stressed here is not only is this the best time to make a move in terms of your marketing, in terms of polishing your brand, not only is this the right time from a marketing standpoint, but it is the right thing to do, period. I mean, the time for this type of change is long overdue. And this is a time when you can, I'm not just speaking about NASCAR here, but brands in general should embrace the change that's coming. It's a time where NASCAR can become far more widespread than the regional image that it has now. The demographics can change wildly, not only in terms of age, but socioeconomic status, and obviously ethnic groups, racial groups. These are all things, these are very fertile areas that from a business and a marketing standpoint are good places to go, but they are also the right places to go for our society in general. This is the right time to mold your image. And I know a lot of the dissenters, a lot of the people are going to say that, you know, the Confederate flag, this is unfair. This is about heritage. And I would probably say that there is some truth to the fact that hate groups, especially during the 1960s and 70s, hijacked the Confederate flag and made it into something that it's not. There may be a lot of truth to that. But the Confederate flag does come with a certain amount of baggage. All right? Legitimately from history. And like I said earlier, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to public relations, you have no rights in the court of public opinion. The image of the Confederate flag is disturbing to enough people that if you know, that's the old saying, if that's a hill you want to die on, that's your choice. Okay. But as an organization, my advice to anybody would be to let these things fall by the wayside. Let them become a part of history, truly become a part of history, and move on. There's other ways to brand your heritage. There are other ways to accentuate Southern pride, whether it be sweet tea or whatever. One of my favorite things, right? So let's move forward. And if I was being hired for NASCAR, that's the direction I would go. And this is something that, from a business standpoint, NASCAR has to go a different direction. It's been losing fans for a long time. And this is the right move at the right time. The changes that have been brought about through COVID-19 and all these other things are chances for us to change up our brand. It's chances for us to experiment with different things and set a new pattern for what comes in the future. All right. Well, that's going to pretty much do it for today's subject matter. But before I go, let me tell you a few things about the Billy D's podcast. First of all, if you have a comment or a suggestion, a topic idea, anything like that, please tweet me. You can do so on Twitter, of course, at Billy D's. There's also a Billy D's podcast Facebook page, and you're free to make comments there as well. I would also ask that you follow me on Facebook and Twitter, only because we make announcements a lot of times ahead of time about what we're doing here. There will be times I will do a commentary podcast like today. There will be other times when I will have a guest co-host on the show with me. There will be other times when I will be interviewing authors or other great people. So a lot happening here. And we do go live occasionally. Now, new episodes debut here on the podcast every Tuesday. Tuesday of every week, we have a new episode. And on the weeks that we go live, we do that the Monday before at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And all the places that will go live and when we will go live, we announce that several days ahead of time. We announce on Facebook and Twitter. So do follow me for those reasons. A lot happening here. Very excited about it. Okay, getting back to Rob and Slim, I'm going to run their program. You can follow Rob and Slim on Twitter as well, and it is at Rob and Slim Show on Twitter. Do follow them on Twitter. Here again, we're going to run the promo. They are part of the hashtag Podern family. Great group. Great hashtag if you enjoy podcasts. You want to get some ideas out there, and every genre imaginable is out there. So do follow that hashtag every once in a while. Hashtag Podern family on Twitter. Here is the Rob and Slim promo. Again, I am going to caution you. Some 4-letter and other various expletives are in this promo, but you can tell, you get a pretty good idea of the feeling of the show. It's definitely very high energy, very entertaining guys, some, just very upbeat, crazy content. The Rob and Slim Show on Twitter, and here it is. I'm Billy D's, and until next time, stay safe.
I'm Rob.
I'm Slim.
And I'm the Lamborghini himself, baby! Yeah!
The Rob and Slim Show is a weekly comedy show with an hour and a half of happy horseshit, followed by 4 half-hour interviews with actors, authors, and more.
Scott Baio loves us.
And I smear shit on my stomach in the bathtub! Fuck yeah!
Catch us live every Wednesday, 6 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on IPMNation.com/live2 or Facebook.com/Rob and Slim.
Or listen to the Rob and Slim Show on Podbean or iTunes, baby! Yeah! I'll just shit my fucking pants!
Well, hello everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.